Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another session of Hashtag Gather to Grow, here with Food from Zanzi and myself, your host, Donumdu. I am very happy to be back. I am very happy to be joining you this evening to have a very important discussion, and I did not expect people showing this much interest, actually. Hello, Wendy.
Hi.
Welcome. Thank you so
Hi,
much for joining me.
It's an absolute pleasure on this cold, wintry night.
Okay. Hi, Larissa. So nice to have you here. You're looking
Hi,
beautiful, my guy. I love it.
Yes.
Love it.
Ricardo is struggling to connect. I'm going to just try and still continue to accept him on my side in the interest of time, because as I was saying, it's actually Ricardo's post on LinkedIn that inspired this discussion. I messaged him a few weeks ago and I was like, hey, guy, this is an important topic to be had. Can we arrange? And he then said, okay, NAMC for communications, they'll assign someone. And then I obviously went to the lovely Wendy as the CEO of Olive South Africa. And then I had to find a producer / business person within the space as well, because that's just how I like to keep the balance with the people that I invite to these discussions. So just a bit of kind of house rules. You are more than welcome to engage with us. Please use the comment section. I will have my guests introduce themselves. So if you have a specific question for each of them, please do share, tag them, ask them specific questions. I don't want to be the only one talking. They shouldn't be the only people talking. This is a space to gather and grow. So please engage and ask as many questions as you'd like. In the meantime, as I mentioned, the discussion is around the olive farming in South Africa. We'll talk about, how the industry is set up, a bit of background of the industry, what is, the challenges when it comes to smallholder producers, business people, entrepreneurs within the space. What challenges do they face? How do we grow holistically, and also how do we transform? Because I think that's also a very important aspect of the discussion. Wendy, you are absolutely amazing. I've followed you for a while. You went from the wine industry and now into olives. Tell us about you, a bit about your background and more about your work at Olive South Africa. Thank you so much.
I think we are moving into a very exciting field. So yes, I'm Wendy Peterson. I've been in the wine industry for 30 years, my entire child and adulthood, I would say. And last year I joined SA Olive because I've also realized the opportunity within SA Olive in terms of growth, market share, but also in terms of transformation that needs to happen and working with emerging farmers. So the guys know that I've always followed my purpose and where I can make a difference. And I do see me within the SA Olive space as contributing to the growth of the industry.
Thank you so much. I know that you're all for transformation. So, Larissa, I think that's a blessing, right? I would say amen to that.
Certainly. Wendy's been
Yeah, please tell us about you, and then I'll go to Ricardo. So first, Larissa, and then we'll move over to Ricardo. Thanks so much.
So, Larissa Manga from the Eastern Cape. Grew up in a farming background. Long story short, came to the Western Cape, did my undergrad in business. Currently, I own the first black-owned commercial olive oil brand in South Africa. Our olive oil won gold in the World New York Olive Oil Competition in 2022, 2023, and in the London Olive Oil Competition. We are at Woolworths countrywide, and we're the #1 selling brand there also. And we don't own a farm nor a warehouse, so it's just through sheer marketing and just placing it in the right places. And I think fortunately we find ourselves in a great space where people of color are aggressively wanting to be part of to sit around the table, and have discussions around participating in the land question thing. So I think I hold the hopes and the aspirations of many young people of color who do want to get into niche markets, and I think we're doing pretty well. And if you've never had this baby in your life, please upgrade yourself. It's a taste.
I need an upgrade, so please, I must order from you as a belief. Please. Yeah, but I can also walk into any Woolies, so that's also an opportunity. Okay, Ricardo, you are an economist with the NAMC. tell us more about your work and more of your background within agriculture. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dawn. Greetings to the fellow panelists. My name is Ricardo Smith. I'm an agricultural economist at the National Agricultural Marketing Council. I'm responsible for the agricultural industry trusts. So the mandate of the NMC is contained in a piece of legislation called the Marketing of Agricultural Products Act, number 47 of 1996. We basically advise the minister responsible for agriculture on all issues pertaining to the marketing of agricultural products, especially on policy issues.
Thank you so much. A vital role, important, in terms of agriculture generally. Really value the work that you guys do at the NMC. You and your colleagues always able to join us and join these conversations and discussions, which is really important. For people in the industry, primary producers, business owners like Loyiso, people with, in the sector like Wendy as well. So thank you so much for your role that you play as well. Now, I'm going to go back to Wendy and kick off the conversation just with a bit of a background. Tell us what the setup of the olive industry in South Africa is actually about and how it works, just to give us a bit of an overview. And then, if you talk about the primary factors kind of contributing to the growth that has happened in the olive farming in South Africa over the past decade. Thanks.
So the olive industry is a fairly smaller industry if you compare it to the other commodities or the other crops. So the industry produces about 1.6 million liters of olive oil, extra virgin. And then of that, it's about 3,700 hectares of olive trees. And that in total makes up about 250 producers in the industry, growers and nurseries. So it's a fairly smaller industry if you compare to other crops and other industries. But I think that we are working with a high value product or product of prestige. And I do think that our producers over the last few years have done very well in terms of the market share and the prestige and the recognition in the global olive industry. Our producers have been winning international awards, and we are very recognized in terms of the international peers for quality and for high quality and also the prestige of the product. And I do think our producers put a lot of care into producing olive oil that is worldwide recognized. And with the shortage currently in the global market, we can see that there's a high demand for olive oil and olive products from South Africa into the global market. So I think that with a fairly small base, we have in the last few years done a very, very good job, a significant job in terms of the global growth and the recognition. And we're very proud of that.
Thanks so much, Wendy. Just your insights, Ricardo, just from your side as an economist as well. What is your take on the industry? Thanks.
What I've noticed is that there has been a significant growth in the industry. It has grown from about 1,800 hectares in 2012, and in 2020 there were about 700 hectares. So based at the rate at which the trees are being planted, the industry grows at a minimum of about 20% per annum. So the industry produces about 1.5 to 2 million liters of olive oil annually. At the same time, the country imports about 5 to 6 million liters of olive oil. So this highlights a significant gap between the domestic supply and demand.
Also, what is rather exciting is the fact that the olive oil industry, as a member of SA Olive, I think previously has always been a so-called, maybe judging it strictly, we'd say a boys' club. When it's just in the top, the elder old white man in the industry. But I think what is more exciting now is that there is starting to be a lot of more diversification. I mean, the likes of Wendy leading the industry now also is quite not revolutionary, but it's actually quite refreshing. And I think the growth going forward with also our participation in myself is that there is now more broader representation of the olive oil industry, because now we are starting to enter spaces and the population where these are your people in Soweto who are jogging that also need olive oil, Ahmad Bases Lokshin and in townships and in the Mitchells Plain. So now I think with the diverse olive oil industry, which it is now and which is going to grow through Wendy, I think it is going to broaden the market even within the people that it represents. So I think there are exciting times in that. So I do want to say that maybe part of its slow growth and it not having grown as large as the other industries has maybe been stifled by your Stellenbosch mafia.
You were just waiting for me to start, hey?
So I just wanted to on a positive note, I think things are looking up, and Loyiso now, it's Loyiso today, but tomorrow it might be Zukisa, it might be Simpiwe, it might be your children from Mitchells Plain,
Exactly.
So the beauty of it is that it's inclusive, but also now when people see us there, it makes them also want to believe and want to participate in the same.
Yeah.
I love it. I think that's a very important aspect. And I could not leave Wendy out of this conversation, Loyiso. So hence the importance of her being part of it. I already see people are engaging. Mfundo saying there seems to be many players, brands. How are the margins within the industry? I'm not sure who can take this question. Wendy, I want to just also ask if you could take it. And then the next question is just the expansion, of the local agricultural economy. How is it really impacted by the olive industry itself? And especially when it comes to, like Loyiso mentioned, encouraging young people to step into it, also in terms of the employment rate.
The olive industry is a very profitable industry. I come from the wine industry where brands are literally in the industry for 15, 20 years, scrapping 14, 15% GPs. Whereas what I see in the olive industry, there's definitely a drive, and a big portion of that is market share, market access and demand. And I think in the olive industry, we're sitting with a scarcity of the product. And also there's a health aspect to this, and wellness, where people are looking at their health, wanting to become more natural and wanting to consume more natural products and health conscious products. So I do think that there's a big opportunity. And within the space of profitability, I don't think that, and I always say that if an industry is highly protected, you should ask yourself why. Because there might be people in the industry trying to dominate the industry because they don't want any newcomers to take in on that demand. So, and when I started in the olive industry, I questioned myself, why did we know so little about this industry? Why is it such a mysterious industry? And I think that triggered it. Because it is highly profitable and people are making money and they're keeping quiet about the money they make. So let's just be quite honest with it. But I do want to say, attached to that, there's a big government support that is required, because olive is the one industry where the product is not VAT zero rated. Other vegetables oils are, but not olive, which means that the product is on the shelves at a higher price, and people are comparing that price to vegetable oil prices, which is an unfair representation. The consumer will pay less for the product and our country will become healthier. It's a win-win situation on all sides. So I think that is where the focus should be, driving profitability.
And a very important point, Loyiso, you're smiling from ear to ear almost, listening to what Wendy is saying.
Briefly to what Wendy was saying, is brilliantly answered the question. I think if you want to participate in the industry, if you can find the olive oil, I think you'll do well. If you get towards that is one of the attributes that make this thing quite a high value, and we call it a liquid gold, is that in as much as and this is the wave of people that are now living healthy, as Wendy says, and now everyone wants to live organically. I mean, there's a huge market. I think so the demand is there and the market is there, but the problem is that South Africa just does not produce enough, even for us South Africa, so we have to buy things in. So I'm saying to Mfundo, who asked the question about profitability, mate, if you can find the olive oil, You can establish your own brand. You can knock on doors like we did on weekends, knocking on doors and begging people and telling people that you know that they use olive oil. Next time, please, Mama Man, can you please use mine? If he's willing to do those things, then he must come on board and enjoy the ride.
I want to bring Ricardo into the conversation and now talk more about, just in terms of the growth of the industry and the setup and exactly which regions in South Africa is suitable for olive cultivation. And also what are the unique characteristics of these regions to make it so ideal for the growth of the specific commodity. Thanks, Ricardo.
Thanks, Dawn. The olive industry is concentrated in the Western Cape province, which accounts for approximately 95% of domestic production. That is followed by the Eastern Cape at approximately 2%, then Limpopo, Northern Cape, and Free State, each of those provinces accounting for about 1%. So the reason why the industry is concentrated in the Western Cape is because of favorable climatic conditions. That is the Mediterranean kind of climate.
Thank you so much. Wendy, you want to add something?
Yes, I just want to add to say that there's obviously a reason why Western Cape is predominantly 95% of olive producers in the Western Cape. It's because of its Mediterranean climate and also the rainfall. For olive, it is very sensitive that you get the rainfall for the flower to peak in terms of the right season. And also in winter, for example, you can't exceed temperatures higher than 21 degrees within the winter period of the season. And also you can't have temperatures lower than -7 because it affects the flowering and it affects the tree process. Then obviously soils as well. You need to have soils that can absorb water, keep the water. In soils where water can't be kept and more sandy soils is very difficult. So the ideal conditions is in the Western Cape, but I'm still a firm believer that with climate change and with our temperature and weather conditions turning, there might be where it wasn't considered in the past, like for example, Louisa in the Eastern Cape, it might be that we need to do soil analysis and analysis again to see that the factors that drove olive production to the Western Cape in the past, maybe those factors with climate change have changed, and maybe there is an opportunity to grow olive in other provinces, because that would solve a lot of the other provinces' issues in terms of olive production, and just opening up the doorways for emerging farmers in the villages and in the rural communities to start olive trees. The olive tree is also much more resilient in terms of the tree makeup that other crops. It's not so sensitive. Soil nutrition is obviously important, and then also irrigation. And we know that there's plenty of water in the Eastern Cape. So I think that in my term, I would like to explore that research and development to see that can we move olive into other provinces and make it a crop to explore?
Definitely. She's gunning for you, Loisa. She's like, run it in the Eastern Cape. You would.
We've got nothing to lose.
I think also I'm a firm believer of what Wendy is saying. We launched our brand in 2019, and this has always been something that's always been a burning passion of mine. And whenever you are in the Eastern Cape or you've got radio interviews with Mhlobo Wenen and so forth, people are always asking, why can't we grow this thing, here? Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is that a friend of mine who's a farm manager at Tokara was telling me that he grew up in the Eastern Cape in Kaiskamahoek, what we call Kobo, in the Lally of the Lallies there. Yeah. And there wild olives grow perfectly, and I mean they grow in groves. As a result, whenever there are closer ceremonies that are happening or are taking place, the olive tree has got its own religious significance there. And that significance, and it's always put, if this is a meat, the olive tree is always in between, is where they put, and the significance there is that the olive tree in itself is the medium between the dead and the alive. So this history is sitting there embedded, so powerfully, well crafted. I mean, one more thing, whenever men in the Eastern Cape, like myself, when we turned 18, went to the bush, our fathers used to clap hands and go and bow at the chief so that their sons can go and pick this prestigious from this prestigious tree, and that stick would then be obviously what he would use to fight off things. So there's lots of history, African history in it. And I think for me, whenever I've suggested or spoken to guys in the olive oil industry, I know one retired from the agricultural camps. They've always told me can't be grown, and I think that's one of the ways that people are trying to gatekeep this industry and make it one that is just for the the opulent Western Cape, and I think that's nonsense. So I think that we have a responsibility, all of us, including my brother Ricardo in his institution, to invest in this thing and have government lead that conversation. Because I know that there's a farm in Grahamstown that does it perfectly, and 2 or 3 others. Why are we being told and being policed about this thing? So I get quite passionate about it, but I think the idea of planting about 100 or 300 or 400 hectares, whether it's foreign sponsored or whatever, planting 100 hectares in rural areas where this thing is quite significant, it's got spiritual uses, would add value to the economy of the Eastern Cape or anywhere else, but also it will create jobs, and that's what we are all striving towards.
Of course, this is definitely a big aspect of the conversation that needs to be had. And I always say this hour goes by so fast, guys. Like, we're already halfway through and we haven't even covered all of my talking points. We have another comment here from Marlon saying, I proudly buy and advocate for supporting local olive oils, which I claim and know it's true that we produce the best olive oil in the world. That's to everyone in the industry. Congratulations to all of you. So thanks for that comment, Marlon. I'm going to come back to Ricardo as well. Ricardo, you shared this insight, and that's also what sparked this conversation, in terms of other, olive oil producing countries like Spain, Italy, Greece. How does our quality of olive oil compare with these major producers? How do we compete with them? And I wish we could do a little tasting test on this live. Maybe for next time we should send some to everyone. But please let's talk about that aspect, please.
That's Ricardo.
Okay, thanks, Don. I think Wendy has already touched on that. She mentioned that South Africa's olive oil is regarded for its high quality. We compete against the best in the world. Unlike some of the countries which produce different grades of olive oil, ours is entirely extra virgin oil. If you would notice in locally produced olive oil on the bottles, there will be a sticker issued by SA Olives Association. So it's a commitment to compliance sticker. It basically means that the oil is extra virgin, it's completely natural, and it's free from any defects. So as such, the extra virgin oil is the best quality available, and as such, it demands the highest retail price.
I want to bring Loreto back into the conversation just to talk about, the challenges that, small, olive businesses or olive oil producing businesses face when it comes to, maintaining competitive quality and production standards in an industry that's, like we've now spoken about, dominated by these larger scale operations, what you refer to as the mafia, this in the specific area or region. Tell us about this and also what your experience has been since stepping into the industry since 2019. Thanks.
The joy or the benefit of having such a close-knit industry is the fact that a lot of the olive producers mainly outsource the processing. You will get, just like the Koparase, for example, where Dawn has got a state-of-the-art pressing facility, and because I've got about 10 hectares or 15 hectares, it's not worth me buying a 5 million rand, pressing facility. So the nice thing is quite high highly regulated, but you know that all of these, their certifications and all of those things. So I think that's a benefit of it. Wherever I've needed to get olive oil, whenever I've needed to press it, I know that these places, whether it's in Wellington, they're of top quality. So I think that's the benefit. But I think the biggest challenge is when you get a year like last year, 2022, 2023, which I think was the worst in the last 25 odd years. And unfortunately for people like myself who own brands and who are still aspiring to own the first black-owned olive oil farm in the country, it does become, you do stay in a disadvantaged place, because if Ricardo, who is the supplier and the farmer, says to me, listen, Luis, just like last year, I mean, the guy who supplies us, for example, he harvested 50,000 liters of olive oil. In 2022, 2023, these guys were literally harvesting 15,000 liters. So 3 times less what they have always historically been on average producing. Now, what that automatically means is that he's already on a back foot in terms of what he has produced. He's got commitments to retail. He's got commitments to overseas. And now there's employees, who's got a great brand, he's got a great this. The reality is that I am not their priority. Then the long story is that you are stuffed, So that's one of the challenges, and you become the casualty in all of that, I think. But fortunately for ourselves, Woolworths had already ordered so much olive oil last year that it sort of was still sufficient at DC's for the entire year. So yes, it does cripple. But that's why we are always preaching the importance of ownership and land ownership, because once you've got land, it's easy for you to put collateral, to put bank, to get an investment, blah, 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 blah. I could go on and on and on. So I think that's one of the major challenges with us people who own brands, is that we don't own the value chain. And when things like an unexpected climate change drought happens, you're left twiddling your fingers, because the producer is going to put himself first and his family first and his workers, and you will find your own place. And I think this goes across the board, even in the wine industry, with that have got wine brands, that once these guys decide, or the olive oil is determined at such a price, and you are used to selling it and getting R5 from it.
Okay, Dawn, can I just add to that? It's very true what Luiso is saying, because I think that for South African olive oil producers, and this is now across board, emerging producers, but also the commercial entities, that we've really been struck by the situation in Europe with the climate change and the severe weather conditions, because the world demand hasn't changed, and that directly affected South African supply. And you're quite right, Luisa, when you say that if you look, the commercial entity, or where you get your product from, will first look at their clients and their supply before they cater for a third party. And that's the reality of the game. But I do think that as soon as we grow the industry, get more vested interest in the agro-processing bit, and this is the bit where the olive oil is actually produced, then, and get investment into that, then we can look at the entire value chain being owned here.
Thanks so much, Wendy. We have another comment here from Marlon saying olive oil has the potential to contribute to rural livelihoods and reduce unemployment for women and young people. My question is, how could the Rainforest Alliance support farmers to be more sustainable? I think this is a very important question. And then another question here from Duncan Masiwa from Food for Mzansi saying consumers are increasingly seeking brands that align with their values, such as sustainability, quality, and authenticity. Are you also seeing this consumer preference in the olive oil industry? Very good question. What would anyone like to take either one of these? Maybe just from the business aspect, for those that know what the Rainforest Alliance does. Wendy, maybe you can also talk on that point. Yeah, thanks. Let's start with you.
I think that, sorry, Luisa, do you want to go for it?
No, go for it.
So I think in terms of the commercial entities, obviously, there is a big demand for obviously increasing their capacity. And the olive industry is very heavy labor intensive. looking at the labor force, but on the other side, it creates jobs. So from a commercial side, that expansion, financing to expand, providing a service to other smaller role players. And then from the emerging side, as Louise also said, obviously ownership of land, ownership of manufacturing assets, working capital to secure your stock. I think that is a big thing because a lot of these small emerging farmers, if you do sign up a big contract, they would expect you to supply. And the financing for that supply of product is a big thing. So I've heard in the wine industry, people are putting up their houses even as surety, and it's very personal. So I think that where emerging farmers can be helped in terms of financing, opening up opportunities for them. I don't think in olive we've got so much of a market access problem as with other crops because the market wants the product. It is just the availability of the product, securing finance and resources to obtain that contract. I think that is the big thing.
Thanks so much for that, Wendy. Louisa, over to you.
I just wanted to agree with Wendy on that. I think I'm just looking at this question now about barrier to entry and land acquisition. I mean, we could talk about that for days. And we speak about how the land values in the Western Cape are somewhat 3, 4, 5 times the price of the rest in the country. And, you know, we really needed to investigate that, the magnifying glass there. You will find that these are all just colonial structures that are just meant to just move people away from this, you know, this point of privilege of land that we have. But that's another discussion. I think Duncan also mentioned, he mentioned something about new entrants and the organic part and the values. So I was part of the organic show that was at the City ICC about 2 months ago. And a lot of people obviously are asking, is the olive oil organic? And I think it's not a big thing this side. A lot of farmers think that it's quite a schlep getting into that type of conversation because it's quite deep in terms of, you know, soil, this, and even the pesticides that are now used. So I don't think farmers, the ones that I've spoken to and in the main, see it as much of a need. I do think that in the next 2 to 3 years' time, they will fall in line with what the market demands. So from an organic point of view, I think that it's not something that guys are quite comfortable in doing because there's not much noise made about it. But it's certainly something that I want to look into. Part of the challenge is that, you know, where do you find, if Ricardo is my supplier for my olive oil, is he willing to get into a discussion about how we can get someone in here from these institutions that will authenticate and we change his program or his bed irrigation program that is going to fit this thing? And, you know, what are the costs involved? So not a lot of people are making noise about it, but I certainly jump on that bandwagon and have Ubuntu extra virgin olive oil and have an organic sticker there. I do think that it's massive when you go to the countries, you go to America, everyone just wants organic. I do think that it's slowly going to become more fashionable here, maybe in a year, next 2 years. To Duncan, as long as any advice to new entrants? As I said, mate, if you can find the olive oil, the market is there. People consume every day, and that's the beauty of the industry, is that no matter what you're doing, you will buy a pair of shoes, 2 pairs of shoes, maybe in a year or 3 or 4, whatever. But with olive oil, you need to eat it. You need to, use it. You can use it for your skin, and that's what that we're pushing with Wendy at the moment, is how do we get the African market to start looking and seeing olive oil, having a spoon a day in the morning and in the evening of olive oil, and how does that play into the high blood pressure, reducing type 2 diabetes? These are the things that we need to go out there and preach, speak about. So it's a lot.
I absolutely love this conversation. There's so much to be said. I said to him before we started, there needs to be a part 2 on this. And I'm seeing it now. There's so much to be said. Okay, you can go, Wendy.
In terms of the the organic bit and the biodiversity, I think that I've got the privilege in my position to work with a lot of the producers that actually have looked at their farming operations and have been including things like less irrigation, using pest control that is more environmentally friendly. We're also looking at pesticides that is obviously approved to be used. So there's a lot of small little things that has been going on in the industry in terms of more natural organic way of olive farming, and it's very exciting to see because you can actually see that in the quality of the final products when it is in the oil base as well. So there's a lot happening. I don't think that a lot of the producers that's doing this is putting it out there, and that is my job to make sure that whatever we do in the industry is highlighted to the bigger audience, because a farmer, you farm, you do your thing, and you get on with life. And I'm trying them to explain this to the world. How are they actually farming in terms of biodiversity and keeping our natural resources intact?
We have a question here for Ricardo Lunati online. Lunati is my other favorite economist, really great guy. For you, Ricardo, saying, how does the NAMC capacitate startup olive oil suppliers with access to regional and international markets? And then I have another question for you, Ricardo, but we can start with that one. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Dawn. At the NAMC, we advise the Minister on statutory measures. Directly affected groups such as SA Olive will apply for those statutory measures to fund their activities, and a part of that is transformation. Also, on part of the generic functions of the industry, there's also market information as well.
And then another question for you, and I want to also but before I get to that, there's a question here. I want to try to get as many of the participants' questions, and I'm going to go to Loyiso. Loyiso, I hope that your throat and voice is good for this hour. It says, how long does it take for olive trees to reach maturity? I don't know if you can ask that as an aspiring or landowner, producer, primary producer, although you have a processing business of selling it as a brand. Can you answer that question?
5 years. It just depends. Nowadays, guys are harvesting. Are planting trees, are buying 2-year-old trees or 18-month-old trees and planting them. Within 2-3 years after that, it starts giving you some produce. But it's on the 5th year where you can actually get some good yieldage on it. You can get it in the 4th year, but it's not great. That's why, guys, just let it just wait out on the 5th year. Then it just gives you all the yieldage that you want. So, it's quite capital intensive also. So that's why waiting for 3-4 years for production can be quite demanding financially.
I'm committed to inviting my speakers back this evening to another session. And then I think we can specifically talk about, accessing land, the specific talk around cultivation, all the primary on-farm production information that can assist new entrants or people that are looking to enter the industry. And then hopefully we have a better idea, I don't know, maybe towards the end of this year, what Olive SA's plan is in terms of the transformation. I hope that you can, at that point, Wendy, give us more sound and concrete, information as to what the way forward looks like for the industry. And hopefully we see it growing over time. I think the important aspect also to understand is that these things do take time. In agriculture, it's not overnight. I think I'm sure, so you can talk about how you've seen it changing just since you've been in it since 2019. Another comment here saying from Vilakazi Sia, also another great lecturer in the agricultural space as well, saying, good evening, wonderful show. Have you done any work on the mechanical harvesting on olive trees yet? And are we not quite there as a country? Any feedback on this to you, Loyiso, Wendy?
Maybe before Wendy comes in. So the mechanical harvesting machines are always available with farms, for example, that have about 300-400 hectares. And in South Africa, there might be about 2 or 3 of those. So you'll always see them there. Where there's just where harvest takes about 4, 5, 6 months, and this is a massive farm. So the guy who's got a 20, 30 hectares, for him, it's not quite profitable. And I think low-key, the producers also are quite conscious about supporting manual labor vis-a-vis, because those machines, it will take away the sort of employment part of it. So I think a lot of the guys the producers would still prefer to still stick with their workers and provide labor vis-a-vis buying a 7 million rand harvesting machine from Italy or France.
I actually have a question specifically for Ricardo on this point, in terms of, like you're just mentioning, the mechanization that is available that costs a lot of money, compared to then using, the way the labor force that will, benefit our employment statistics and all of that. What is the kind of, agricultural technology and practices that are available or have been adopted locally? And also, how does that increase our production and then also just efficiency in terms of the industry, Ricardo?
Advancement in irrigation technologies and cultivation practices have improved the yields and efficiency in olive farming. In some instances, I've seen farmers using double-line drippers as well as micro sprinklers, so that has increased the production significantly.
So much. Wendy, any comments there?
As Louisa said, I do think it's a double sort of blade, if you look at mechanization, if you look at labor. What we found is that the bigger commercial entities, there are some of them that have gone through fully mechanization, but you will still require a labor force, obviously, to 5-6 per tree in order to handle the mechanization. Where I do think that where we could advance the industry moving in future, if you, for example, sitting with a farm and you want to develop it into olive, to consider that from the beginning, because it will affect the layout of your farm, obviously the meters between the trees, your irrigation system. It affects a lot of things. So if you're considering going into olive farm, consider that from the beginning. If you look at, for example, machines, you would need about 2.5, 3 million, 3.5 million rand for a machine like that. But then you have to do the cost comparison of how much labor would you require in terms of the machine and add it to that and work out the costing. We have found that with our bigger commercial entities, it makes financial sense. But then obviously we are also very supported of employment and job creation. And we do require that skill in the olive production still. So yeah, we're just weighing off where you are as a farmer and what your affordability is in terms of that and your labor force.
Another comment here from Fundo saying, what is the split between fresh olives and olive oil, and where seems to be the focus more in terms of, producing it at the moment within the industry? I'm not sure who wants to take that one. Teresa, maybe you or Wendy? Ricardo?
Okay, produces about 1.5 to 2 million liters of olive oil, but we also produce about 1,400 tons of table olives. So the most focus is on the olives for olive oil, which is more profitable.
We're almost nearing the end of the conversation. Louisa, you can go ahead.
I just wanted to agree with Ricardo. I think wherever you do find an olive oil farm, you'll always see certain cultivars that are just merely there, your camalatas and so forth, that are there for your table olives. And I think for example, the guy that we work with, he sells his table olives to a neighboring farmer who's a specialist in that, who's got many of these drums. So I think there is quite a fine split, because the bulk of it remains the liquid gold that we are selling. But there is also a nice touch to the table olives, which also brings in quite a lot of money per kg. So it's always there's no one rule fits all, but the farmers do sort of diversify their incomes when harvesting, and harvest depending on time and what they want to do. So there is maybe a 60-40 split, 70-30, but I know the bulk of it, given the shortage of olive oil, is in the main the liquid gold.
Thank you for the wonderful insights. That's all my speakers. I could not do this weekly without them. I'm looking forward to the next show. Thank you so much. We do this twice a month. If you have any suggestions, like I said, I'm committed to doing another one of these on this specific commodity. Another comment saying any developments on using olive pits for activated carbon in SA. I actually would like to ask exactly for us to explain what that is firstly. Maybe you can give us some context to the question as well, please, our speakers. Anyone who would be willing to take it.
It's not on my side. My experience is that all the mulch, the byproduct of olive oil, once completely pressed from extra virgin to olive oil, all of that, what is left over is mainly just used for mulching back at the trees. Also, I don't know if guys have gone that far in getting a separator to get the pit out for that. So according to my knowledge, I don't know anyone who's gone that far in or leading that competition in the olive oil industry at the moment. But Wendy might have.
So interesting. That's exactly one of my questions. My first questions I asked when I visited the olive farm end of last year, because I'm a researcher. So what happens to the waste is very important to me. I can confirm we are from the association. We are working with one or two people to see if we can add value to the waste of olive. And there might be exciting developments. I've also seen very exciting products being developed from Turkey, and we might engage to say that how can we add extra value to the value chain by producing products from the waste of olive. And yeah, there's exciting times ahead.
Okay, there's your answer. I'm looking forward. Getting ready, yes.
I'm an innovator, so looking at the entire process and what happens through the process is very exciting.
Vilakazi is saying, could you perhaps do a show on the impact of agriculture sector by the rise of artificial intelligence? I'll definitely add that to my list. Just be sure to take a screenshot of that. And then just as we wrap up the conversation, starting to near the end, I think Loyiso mentioned, issues around climate change and the drought really affecting his business and operation. But how do we kind of start, incorporating more of those practices, sustainable practices across the board to understand the importance of this? And I think, Wendy, this is, I guess, where you guys come in more specifically as an organizational body for the specific commodity, but also the role of government policies and subsidies to support, the growth of the farming sector, and specifically people like Loyiso and others who have contributed and joined this discussion tonight. I think that's such an important aspect. I hate that I have to do it towards the end of this show, but I think we could probably talk about it for days at end. But let's talk about the role of government and how do we ensure that we grow it and fast track that growth. How do we ensure that more land is available in this province, in the Western Cape where I'm from? All of those conversations need to be had. Wendy, over to you, and then I'll give the rest of my speakers also their take. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Dawn. There's been some very interesting developments in the last few months. So we, as the SA Olive Association, has just signed an agreement with the Western Cape Department of Agriculture in terms of future support and obviously support for emerging farmers specifically, but also research and development and where we are heading with getting pesticides approved. So that is very exciting. I've also had several conversations with national government to say that because transformation, I can just be honest about this, transformation in the olive industry has been very slow, or there's very few. Loyiso is a very good example, but if you expect the industry to transform, how does government get involved and how do we partner? So I've been having some very interesting conversations with national government to say that where there are government land, how do we make that opportunity for emerging farmers to explore and where land is available? Then obviously from the industry to grow, we really must push that bad zero in terms of getting olive oil and extra virgin within the same mandate as with other vegetable oils. We are also exploring a codex, which obviously covers the standard for olive oil in terms of exports, but also imports. And we are aligned with the other vegetable oils when it comes to the codex. So we are evaluated similarly under the codex, but when it comes to the support in retail and that VAT zero, we're not, the playing field is unequal. And then the last thing is that, I don't know if you know, but we get a lot of olive oil imported from other countries. And those imports, we need to remember our organization is funded by statutory levy, which means that there's a levy imposed on olive oil and table olives. And so for the domestic market, we can ensure that levies are paid. But when it comes to the imported product, it's very difficult to raise that statutory levy on imports, and that is where government can support the industry, because whatever levies is generated is used to advance the industry. And if we are not sure of 50% of the imports, then how can we advance the industry with only the domestic statutory? So I think those are the aspects where government can really help us and support us moving forward.
Ricardo, your comments? Thanks.
Okay, in addition to what Wendy has mentioned, you will remember that during the deregulation process in the 1990s, the government removed subsidies on agricultural products. However, there are some instruments that are available at the Department of Agriculture as well as within some of the SOEs. You will remember that recently the former Minister of the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development launched the blended finance scheme through the Land Bank and IDC. There's also Agri-PEE funding available at TALRAD as well, if there's element of agro-processing on those businesses.
Okay, so very clear avenues and aspects from both Wendy and Ricardo in terms of access points for developing producers and business owners like Loyiso to gain support and kind of see how they can transform in their own businesses and also grow and make room and space for others in the sector. I feel like that's a very important aspect. Loyiso, you have the last word, my guy. And then as I wrap up, I'm actually going to, now I'm saying Agri-PEE is a myth, okay? Thank you. I love how engaging this discussion so far.
He worked there. He was employed there for the longest time. So.
He knows.
Your final comment and also just your outlook for the industry as someone who's been in it now since 2019, someone who's really dedicated to growing. Some people also commenting here to say they admire your passion to transform and also to grow in your own capacity, but to make space for others. What would you like to share as a message to others in the sector, but also just how you see the future of the South African olive industry?
I think the first one would be to just support local. I think we need to start being patriotic about, small entrepreneurs, small businesses that are using agriculture as a side hustle or as a second form of income. I think we should not and just put our heads down and just support anything and everything that is done, especially by young people or our generation or older. So that's the main focus, is to be at least a bit prouder and to be a little bit more Pan-African when it comes to supporting local, supporting Africa products, because when we go to other countries, they truly, truly love what we're doing here. So I think that's the first thing. I do think that we maybe now with the GNU and the new ministers, maybe they'll start taking us seriously and they'll start, being excited about the idea of young people of color getting into traditionally white boys club industries. I think without that, all of the work that we are doing, inspiring, and Wendy doing this and being progressive, all of that means nothing if we have no access to land. And that is just not an EFF rhetoric, but that is something that's important, So I think we must just be supportive to one another. One of the things that we are looking forward to is that we have developed our very first biltong infused olive oil that we should be bringing.
Nice.
We bring out lemon, garlic, infused and a biltong infused olive oil, and we bring out our own balsamic vinegar. So we're quite excited about that. And people should look out for that. And yeah, soon we'll be a Takealot countrywide. I think that is, to me, much better than Woolworths. So support people, and I'm more than happy to talk to anyone else who wants to get into the industry. I think my responsibility is to leave the ladder there, then kick it on my way up. And I think that's all our responsibility in creating the future that we want.
Thank you, Loyiso. I commend you for the work that you've done so far in the industry. You will be the first Black producer of olives in this country. You will be.
No.
My guy, you will be.
Put it in the universe.
Yes, I must. You say it. I'm there with you. I almost want to cry thinking about it, but like, I think an important aspect is to just, I'm committed to having this discussion again in a few months' time. I have 2 dates available here, and then we can reassess, and then we do it again next year. We go over it. I think the consistency of having these conversations over and over again is important, and I'm committed to that. Thank you to all of my speakers this evening. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you to everyone who contributed in the comments. Thank you for rallying everyone, Loyiso. I think it's so great, and I would like to commend you all and thank you for your contributions to the agricultural sector. Bye, Dankie.
Thank you, Dawn. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, colleagues.